Hi guys, welcome back to the second week of remote English learning. I hope you had a good spring break with your family, and I hope you're ready for another week of school, online school. All right, so if you could take a look over here to Canvas again. I thought I'd try something a little different this week, maybe to make things a little easier for you to follow. Putting the dates over here on the side so that you can see what you should be doing during the week of 414 through 417. I also gave you a brief synopsis underneath the directions for the week, what you should be doing. Letter A says watch and listen to this week's video about discussion questions 1 and 2. That's what you're going to do here in a few minutes. Then you need to make sure that you complete discussion number 3 by Wednesday, April 15th by 11:59 p.m. This has a 4-hour extension onto the discussion due date. Letter C says complete chapters 1 through 13 questions by Thursday, April 16th at 11:59 p.m. Again, this is another 4-hour extension for the discussion. On Friday, please watch the video that's going to review discussion question 3 and also the questions that go along with chapters 1 through 13. And then over the weekend, you want to review for Monday's test. You'll see that later on this week show up, but it will not open until Monday, so you won't be able to take it on Monday. And then there should be a letter F here, but it's not here. It says attendance quiz. Make sure that you do that. You want to take that attendance quiz every week. This one is graded. There's twofold reason for doing it. One, it tells me that you have actually come into Canvas and that you are doing what you need to do for my class, and you're attending it, so it actually acts as my attendance. And it will also give me an idea of where you stand as far as understanding what's being taught. This week's attendance quiz will be basically on Things Fall Apart. There's 4 questions for it, so you want to make sure you do that. Really, it is advantageous for you to take this attendance quiz. We've been instructed to let the principals know whenever students aren't coming into the classroom and doing the remote learning that we're putting out there for you. So you want to make sure that you're doing that for me. Okay, so let's go to the discussion questions then. So the ones that you submitted last week, actually you submitted them, I believe, by Monday at 8 a.m., I believe was the time. Okay, so discussion question number 1 says, according to Chinua Achebe, the primary purpose of the novel is to combat Joseph Conrad's caricature of the Nigerian people by highlighting the complexity of the Nigerian people and their society. What examples can you give from chapters 1 through 6 that show the Nigerian people and their society to be complex, and how do these examples compare with the complexity of our society? Okay, so Joseph Conrad, we didn't read his novel, but his novel was called Heart of Darkness. And Joseph Conrad's novel was written to show the importance of bringing Christianity to the Nigerian people. He wanted his novel to show the Nigerian people to be savages, to be savage-like, to live beast-like, animal-like lives, which would be anything but a complex society. And then Chinua Achebe wrote his novel in response to that novel. Now, Chinua Achebe was a Nigerian man. His family was from Nigeria, whereas Joseph Conrad obviously wasn't. So Chinua Achebe has more of a firsthand knowledge of what actually went on in Nigeria. Now, the setting for the story is Umuofia, and the tribe of Umuofia is actually a fictional tribe. But we can still understand, we can still see the complexity of the Nigerian people through this tribe, this imaginary tribe. Okay, so if we look at the story, because we're only looking at chapters 1 through 6 here, there's all kinds of things that shows to us that the story, Things Fall Apart, is about a very complex society. Even beginning in chapter number 1, it talks about currency, and it talks about Okonkwo's father, who was a debtor, who borrowed a lot of money from all of his neighbors, rather than raising crops and selling crops in the marketplace. It was just, he just would rather be lazy and not plant a good field or not harvest a good harvest. He just chose to not live that type of life. So he went into debt with many of his neighbors. Now, the currency they had was called cowries, but it was still a currency. It was a way to buy things, to sell things, to trade things at the marketplace. And the marketplace obviously was where they went to sell their goods and their wares. And also it was a place for meeting as well. So we have currency. The story also talks all about traditions. It talks about the breaking of the kola nut to celebrate life. It talks about how a person settled on the bride price for their daughter. It talked about festivals like the Week of Peace. It talked about what the women did to celebrate a young woman becoming married. It talked about the traditions of having children. It talked about death and the traditions of funerals. So there were all kinds of traditions that the Nigerian people had as part of their lives. They also had religion. Religion was very important to them. They prayed to their ancestors for life and for death and for protection against their enemies. They had ancestral feasts. They had the Ekwu, which were the ancestral spirits that some of the elders dressed up as. They also had Chukwu, who was their supreme being or their supreme god, who, while the religions aren't any of the religions that we recognize in the world that we live in, Chukwu was very much like the supreme being in many of our world religions as well. Another chapter talks about consumerism, which involved the marketplace. Another chapter discussed how to make sure that a land was fertile. It talked about rotating crops. It talked about knowing that to get fertile land, sometimes you have to burn the land first, put the fire out, and then the regrowth of the land shows great abundance. So they had a lot of knowledge about how to get the most out of their fields and the most out of their harvests. They also talked about war. Umuofia was very respected for its war skills and the fact that the neighbors feared them. And in one particular chapter, it talks about how a Mabeno man killed a Umuofian woman, and Umuofia sent to Mabeno one of their emissaries, which happened to be Okonkwo, to develop a peace treaty so that the two would not go to war. And the peace treaty involved bringing a virgin bride back for the man who lost his wife, and also bringing back Ikefuma also as part of the peace treaty. Now, things didn't end well for Ikefuma, but it was part of their peace treaty. So they had their warlike ways, which involved peace treaties, which, if you think about savages wouldn't have any type of war skills other than their personal war skills to beat their enemy, their one and sole enemy, not like the group's enemy. This story also talks about family structure. Okonkwo is the patriarch of the group. He has many wives, he has many children that he shelters and that he protects and that he provides for. Now, it's a patriarchal society. In this society, they do allow for beating a man to beat his wife in the appropriate context. It couldn't be done at the inappropriate times or in the inappropriate ways. And beating one's children to keep them in line, to keep them submissive. Obviously, that's not something that we agree with in our own society, but it was something that it was acceptable in their society. back on agriculture, something that I did forget to talk about is they talk about sharecropping. And sharecropping is when somebody wants to become involved in farming, they can't do it on their own because they don't have enough money on their own to do it. So they go to somebody who has more money and has more land and has more seed, and they plant for them. They get money, they get seeds from them. They plant for themselves, and they also plant for the person that they were sharecropping for. And it's just a way to build up your own land and your own seed and your own harvest as well. So again, we're talking about complexity, something that makes a society complex. And that's what we're seeing in this story. They celebrate, I think I said already, they celebrate holidays. They talk about folk tales. They have forms of punishment. They have their own court system. That if somebody does something wrong, they go to court, and then the court decides on their innocence or their guilt, and then based on whether they're guilty or not, they decide on the form of punishment that should be taken. So a lot of what we're reading in this story sounds very much like what we have in our own society. We have a family structure. We have laws that we're expected to live by. We have a way to do business. We have currency. We have our own justice system. And we have religion and traditions. And while what we have is different from what they have, it doesn't make their society any less complex than what our society is. It's just maybe a different way of going about things that makes us different. But it doesn't make them any less complex than we are, which is the exact opposite of what Joseph Conrad's novel, Heart of Darkness, was trying to say about the Eumophian people to begin with. Okay, so that's discussion question number 1, which I read a lot. I read all of the responses for that matter, and your responses were very good. Okay, so discussion question number 2 says, in these 3 chapters, we learn more about the protagonist Okonkwo and his son Noel. We also meet Okonkwo's neighbor and character foil Obarika. Please discuss the character development of each of these characters. Use examples from the story to support your discussion. In addition to Noel, we also meet Azima, who is Okonkwo's favorite daughter. Please compare and contrast these 2 characters. Okay, so let's talk about Okonkwo first. We find out, like I said, Okonkwo is the protagonist. He's going to do anything to ensure that he succeeds. He's going to be the manliest of all the men. He's going to be the strongest, the bravest, the most courageous. He is going to be the most deadly. He's going to be the most of anything that makes a man a man. And he is this way because of what he saw in his father, Unoka, who was the epitome of what in Okonkwo's eyes was a failure, which was a man who couldn't pay his way in life, who accepted the handouts of others, who was happy with a single wife with just one son, who would rather enjoy leisure-like activities such as playing music and entertaining people with stories and song than working and being able to provide for others. So he is the protagonist. Now, what is really interesting about Okonkwo is that all throughout the story, we see him being the manliest of men, but then we come across the story about Azima and Ekwefi. Ekwefi is Okonkwo's second wife, and Azima is their only daughter, and Azima is sickly. And when Chilo comes to take, who is the priestess of Agabala, I believe, comes to take Azima to the oracle's cave, and Ekwefi decides to follow along. It's not, we're really surprised to find out at the end of this particular mini story, within the novel, that Okonkwo is there as well. And they kind of share a tender moment where they talk about how they had once met and the love that they have for this child, and how Okonkwo is going to stay there with her through all of this until their daughter is returned back to the Obi, and she is safe. So we see a different side to Okonkwo. So while he is the manliest of men, or at least he puts on that he's the manliest of men, he also has a soft side to him as well. We see that soft side also coming out after he strikes down Ikefuma. Whenever he kills Ikefuma, they say in the story about how he couldn't eat for the next 3 days, and how he questioned how he could possibly go soft after he's killed so many people in battle, but killing this child, this young man, this teenager, was something that was very difficult for him to do. So we do get a different side to Okonkwo. Noao is his son. Noao, Okonkwo fears what he sees in Noao, because Noao has many of the attributes and many of the characteristics of his father Unoka. So he fears that Noao is going to be just like his dad. He's going to be weak, and he's not going to be a success, and he's not going to be anything like him. So what does Okonkwo do? He tries to beat him into being a man, which doesn't work, because the harder he pushes Noao to be just like himself, the further Noao pushes away from his father. So Noao is a thinker. Noao challenges much of what goes on in the tribe. He doesn't understand why Ikefuma had to be killed. He doesn't understand why twins have to be thrown into the evil forest. How could twins be evil when all they did was be born as twins? So he challenges a lot of what the tribe just assumes is acceptable. And that's going to cause problems the whole way down the road between he and his father. There's always going to be an obstacle or a barrier between them. And that's the fact that Noao thinks about the things that are happening. And now there's Obarika. Obarika is the character foil for Okonkwo. So if you think back to what a foil is a character who is just like the protagonist, but reacts differently than the protagonist acts. So Okonkwo is strong, he's manly, he follows along with everything the tribe tells him to do. He doesn't question anything about what the tribe tells him to do. He just does it. All right. There's no adaptability. There's no flexibility in Okonkwo at all. It's either black or it's white, and there's definitely no in between. It's either right or it's wrong, and there's definitely no in between. Then there's Obarika. And Obarika is just like Okonkwo. He's a manly man. He goes out to war. He has his, heads that he's taken during war. But he's a lot like Noao. He questions things. He talks about why is it that when Okonkwo accidentally killed the young man, why did he have to leave the village? Why did they have to go in and burn down his obis and burn down his land and burn down his farms and kill the animals and burn up the harvest? Why did they have to do all those things for a crime that was accidental? And he questions that. He also questions the idea about throwing twins away. He said about his own wife had twins, and after the birth of the twins, they had to take the twins out into the evil forest and leave them because they were evil. And he questions, how is it possible that, two innocent babies could possibly be evil? So where Okonkwo follows everything lockstep as it's supposed to be done, Obarika thinks things through, and he questions things, and he doesn't always think that the way the tribe has decided to go is the best way to go. He doesn't think that killing Ikefuma was the thing that the tribe should do. And most importantly, he doesn't think that it's something that Okonkwo should participate in. And then there is Azima. Azima is Okonkwo's favorite child and daughter. And Azima and Noao are opposites. They're not foil opposites, but they're opposites. Noao is tender and kind and sensitive, and Azima is the boy that Okonkwo wishes he had. She is courageous, and she's brave, and she's strong, and she fights for everything in life she's fought to live, because she was an Obanji child. So she has fought and she's succeeded over top of the Obanji child that she was. So they're exact opposites. One strong, courageous, brave, and a fighter, and the other one is soft and sensitive and a thinker. So the two of them are exact opposites. Okay, so that brings us to the end of chapter 9. You should be reading and responding to chapters 10 through 13 and doing those questions for chapters 1 through 13. We'll come back together in a video on Friday and talk about it a little bit more and get you ready for this part 1 assessment on Monday. And then we'll keep going from there. So have a great week. Work hard, take care of yourself, and don't forget to have a little fun along the way. All right, have a good week. Bye-bye.